So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our senior speaker, Dr. Ken Schafel.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. Thank you, Dr. Kane, for your remarks. To everyone here today, congratulations. This is a wonderful day. I can't thank enough all the friends and family and spouses that have come out to support these outstanding graduates. And I want to make sure it's known that there are multiple programs graduating here today, 61 people from internal medicine, pulmonology, critical care, nephrology, gastroenterology, cardiology, general surgery, vascular surgery, and urology. And these advanced training fellows have been our mentors and our preceptors, and it is a thrill to be graduating with you here today. And I want to give a special shout out to the preliminary residents who are graduating. You've put in a very tough year here, and you're going on to your specialty programs. And we will miss you, and we respect the work you've done, and thank you for being here. I also, on behalf of all of us, want to thank our teaching attendings, our department chair people, and the program chair people who have taught us and given us your clinical experience and who have pushed us to excel. You have handled our errors with grace and tact, and you've been committed to our advancement. Thank you. The success here today is as much yours as it is ours. So, one thing I see now that I did not see when I started residency is that many of the patients we care for are in their final 24 months of life. And the people that will live the longest with the experience of the hospitalization are not the patients, but the family. These hospital admissions represent a major turning point in the lives of families, not just the life in the event of the patient. And we have enormous power to affect these families, yet they are not our patient. In fact, very often the family seems to lie in an undefined place at the adjunct of medical care. I remember early in residency I found the presence of families to be a surprise. Our lectures in medical school had been about organ systems and disease, and all of our training exercises had been with a single simulated patient who never had a family with them. That would have meant hiring many more actors. So my impression of medical care was caring exclusively for a family and then discharging them home to a family you've never met. And of course, it doesn't work out like that, not ever. So today, I want to talk about families, and I want to talk about love. About a month ago, my older brother and I flew back to our hometown of Chicago to help our parents move out of their home of 48 years. Now, obviously, that's a large physical task, but you can be sure any major family change is a larger emotional task. Major changes on the family level evoke many things: attachment to the past, the inventory of issues that any family accumulates over time, and fear of what lies ahead. The emotional and family dynamics proved more difficult for my brother and I than we anticipated. We had not felt these particular dynamics at play for years because we had moved away. And as the days wore on, the emotion wore us down. I had thought that because I'd become a doctor, I'd be better at this. I've led family meetings, I've led goals of care discussions. I thought I'd be a pretty stable ship in the sea of family change. But when on the fourth day, my brother came to me and said bleakly, "We need a miracle," all I could say back was, "I agree." Now, what I haven't told you is that my brother has a PhD in marriage and family therapy. He's been a licensed clinical counselor for 25 years, and he's a lecturing faculty member of the University of Colorado. You'd think those would be pretty good cards to hold for a major family change event. And in case you think he might cash in easy in the face of adversity, he's a former varsity wrestler, he's a rock climber, and a marathon runner in the Colorado altitudes. So he actually is pretty effective in the face of adversity. But when he said to me, "We need a miracle," and I said, "I agree," that was the combined collective wisdom of $500,000 of education and all of our years of training. And I thought about these families that we meet here at the hospital, dealing with crisis level news, struggling with illness, struggling with impending change. And I realized for the first time, they have it pretty rough. Sometimes we may look at these families and we may think, if I ever get there, I'm going to handle it differently. But let me tell you, you may be an MD and you may be a PhD, but when the combination of family dynamics and major change arrive, it can give you a major smackdown. Now, my brother and I had taken a week off to do this particular task. It was early May, the weather was perfect, and we were moving our parents 7 blocks down the street, and it nearly wrecked us. Now, things ended up pretty well for us, and we got through it. We did what we had to do physically and emotionally, and my brother did a virtuoso job of counseling on the spot. But the journey, I want you to know, was not smooth, and it was not easy. And I say this because it drove home the following point. A point I had forgotten, because maybe it's easier to forget. Families are a display of grotesque imperfection and redeeming love that defies easy explanation. And it's to these families in that state that we are often delivering very major news and announcing to them an enormous change in their family circumstance. And I wonder if we get it. This is a life stress scale. And you can see that death of a family member is 63, change in health as a family member is 44, death of a spouse is 100. But change in living conditions is 25, and that's where my brother and I were functioning, and it nearly wrecked us. So we're dealing with a level of stress double or 3 times that we're giving to families. And I wonder if we really appreciate what they're going through, because most of us left our families 8 to 15 years ago. We moved out, we went to college, we did things. We're in a process that I call transiting the donut of family involvement. You're born, you live in your family, you leave to college, and sometime around residency, you're in the middle of the donut. You've been out for 8 to 15 years, and you've been experiencing an ever-increasing degree of freedom. And it may seem you've shuffled off those boundaries forever, but that's not the case. And yet we who are at this apogee of independence are frequently announcing to others that their independence is about to be substantially reduced. They can't go home. They can't live independently anymore. They're going to need care. Things have changed. And I wonder if we really get what that kicks off inside these families, if we really get what they're going through when they hear that and the process that's to follow. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from a family that's been through it. There was a young woman who grew up in New Hampshire, part of a large family. And for years, this family used to volunteer together at the local food pantry. She went off to college, where she liked theater and poetry, and she even wrote a play. She graduated and moved to Brooklyn. And one evening, early this spring, she went out for a jog. A short while later, she was found down in the nearby park, pulseless and unresponsive. She was rushed to the local hospital, where a CT of the head showed a massive bleed. She was transferred here to Dr. Langer's service for the possibility of surgery. An aneurysm had ruptured, and she had experienced a devastating subarachnoid hemorrhage. She was 25 years old, and she had almost no neurologic responsiveness. Her family mobilized from New Hampshire and Boston, and they all came down. So many relatives were in the room that it was completely and constantly packed. The hospital even gave her parents an additional room on 8 Lockman so they could sleep here and not have to be away from their daughter. As the days wore on, she became even less responsive, and the family had to be told that there was no intervention to be done. Among the family members crowded around the room was my best friend from college. And he told me that the current issue at hand was that the parents understood that no recovery was possible, but that their daughter had signed up to be an organ donor, and they would like to see that wish fulfilled. Yet she wouldn't stop breathing over the vent, and the parents didn't know what to do. So I called Dr. Huberman at 9 a.m. in the morning, gave her that problem, and she said simply, "I'll come to the room." She came to the room, and later that night, organ donation went forward. Dr. Langer came with the family into the OR for a living donation. The patient was terminally extubated. The parents watched as the heart monitor stopped. Now, if you've never seen an explanted pair of human lungs, you should. These aren't hers, this was another time and another place, but they are not unlike angel's wings. Her wish was fulfilled, and her lungs were given to a person that by definition she would never meet. What does a family say about this 7 weeks later? This is from her father. Thank you for thinking of us and using the story of our daughter's final days to inspire others. It is uplifting for us. It offers some positive meaning as a counterweight to what is otherwise just pain. The Lenox Hill experience could not replace the pain of this tragedy, but we were always surrounded by good people, some of them very powerful people in terms of knowledge, skills, and resources at their disposal, all trying to do whatever they could. In the end, we had no choice but to face the awful reality. The enormous emotional stress is overwhelming, and it's confusing on many levels. To make sense of it, all you can try to do is put it into context. That takes on many layers and is not just about the hospital, but it would be far more difficult and disturbing if the context immediately around you is dispassionate clinical process, inflexible rules and policies, infrequent need-to-know communication, callous self-interest, hospital politics, or any number of other ways you might describe the absence of love from the situation. We are blessed with a large and close family to surround us with love. But when you feel it radiate out to you to include not just our family, but on some level, the larger human family, it makes it a little easier to cope. When you realize the only important thing in life is the compassion and support we offer one another, and you see it all around you, it does not make it less painful, but it confines that pain to a box. That pain is no longer the only story, overwhelming everything else. It's surrounded by something bigger and worth living for. Every person we met directly at Lenox Hill conveyed such compassion and support, every person, and we met a lot of people. Of course, the first thing you really want to know in the situation is whether our daughter was getting the proper care. Do these people know what they're doing? Are they paying proper attention? In retrospect, she had little chance by the time she arrived at Lenox Hill, but the hospital threw themselves into action. It was amazing and relieving to witness. There was some hope in the early days, and we really needed it. But as she lingered in a coma and finally died after 5 days, after becoming progressively less responsive despite all efforts, as reality started to settle in, you start to notice what matters most in hospital care. Professional acumen, of course, but that's not enough. The effort and intensity of care seemed well beyond job descriptions or pursuit of a good performance evaluation. The way so many people seemed to take a personal interest was humbling. We just knew our daughter was getting the best care possible. We always felt like there was a team of doctors hovering and working things out. They stopped by frequently, updating us, explaining as much as they could, answering any questions we had. Nurses were doing everything they could think of for our daughter and for us, and we were not easy to deal with, given our numbers and state of panic. Every person who entered the room first introduced themselves, then explained exactly what they were doing, then asked if we had questions. Though we had to make decisions, there was never pressure to rush them. Somehow Dr. Langer and others conveyed a perfect balance of hard facts, weighted alternatives for next steps, and passionate concern for our situation. I've been in other hospital situations dealing with illness and the passing of my parents. I don't think Lenox Hill is the norm, unfortunately, but it is an example. We could not have been more confident in the hospital staff and thankful for how they were caring for her and us all. As I said, it made a big difference in our ability to cope. Though there were way too many people that deserve thanks, if you can, if you have a chance, please specifically convey our gratitude to Dr. Langer, who had the unenviable job of attending to the worst of it with us. He was fantastic, though hardly the only one. I wish I could let them all know how we felt. If I would dare to add anything to that, it would be just to say that Dr. Langer never took their daughter to the OR. What was done for them was done at the bedside and in the room. And what's being described here is the caring of the care. What can make our care for people excellent? Is it some new technology that hasn't been invented yet? Or is it something incredibly old that's already perfect? Ask yourself a question. Do you think compassion will inform your love? Or do you think love will inform your compassion? You already know the answer. So the title of this address is Love is the New Black. What else goes with everything, fits great in any circumstance, and is appropriate for any time of night or day? If you practice medicine in the service of love and with love, it will emotionally make more sense to you and allow you to have a better run. Thanks once again to our teaching attendings, our program directors, and our department chairman, Dr. Astis. Thanks to all the family, partners, loved ones, and friends that came out today. And to the graduates of the class of 2017, congratulations.